So when you started out as an apprentice, maybe if you could just again briefly try and paint that picture of what it was like, what was the knowledge of wood turning like? What did it mean to be be embarking on that career? Was it unknown? Was there, I'll let you go.
It was all very new because all the old wood turning that had been there in the past was gone. And when the Kilkenny design workshops brought in people like Maria Van Kesteren, they came in to design product, and also they would provide training for some of the workshops initially. And in my case, Marie Van Kesteren trained John Shield, and John Shield set up his own workshop in Bagnallstown, and then he trained me as his first apprentice. And he trained others afterwards as well, but I was his first apprentice. So there was kind of like, it started with Kilkenny in the workshops and then spread out from there. So you ended up with 3 or 4 fairly large workshops with maybe 2, 3, 4 or 5 guys working there, making designs designed in Kilkenny. So you were given a blueprint and you were asked to make this particular product in huge quantities sometimes. And they were always, all the items were functional items: bowls, lamps, candle holders, household items like salt and pepper sets, that kind of thing. So it was all utilitarian work. At the same time, it just should be mentioned that Maria Van Kesteren was an art wood turner, which we didn't know about. And it was all kept very quiet and didn't come out until much later, that she was actually an artist wood turner at the same time. But while she was in Kilkenny, she was doing very functional work and training people how to do that functional work. I mean, even people like Kieran Forbes from Glenstall, he ended up going to Maria for a while and training with her in the workshops, or training with Jimmy Houlihan, who had been trained by Maria. So you can see her influence spreading right out through the whole wood turning scene. She's the godmother or the grandmother of all Irish wood turning. So there we go. That it?
Thanks, Liam. I'm going to see if I can't mute you actually now because I'm not hosting anymore, but maybe you can mute yourself. So we have Liam, the godfather, Maria, the grandmother, Roger, I don't know what that makes you, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about how wood turning found you. I think you came at it from a slightly different angle to Liam.
Yeah, I did, very much so. In a previous life, I was a teacher. I taught English and French, and totally by chance, in 1992, I was on a career break, and I happened to wander into a wood event, which was actually in the sports hall in UCD, where everything was being done from, or demonstrated from, growing trees to building boats to wood turning. And there were 4 or 5 wood turners set up with their lathes turning, and I'd never seen a lathe before. I'd never seen wood turning before. One of them I remember was the great David Comerford, a wonderful Irish wood turner. I was absolutely mesmerized. And just to cut a long story short, when I went home, I just said to my wife, Siobhan, this is something I'd love to have a go at while I have the time. So I went to evening classes and was completely smitten, and put up a small workshop at the end of the garden, bought a small lathe, a few tools, and started turning. And my 1-year career break, the school that I was teaching in were very kind. They extended it to 2 years, to 3 years, to 4 years, and I was turning. And one of those years, I spent in Kilkenny with what was then the Crafts Council, the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, who ran a course called Craft and Design it was a Craft and Design business course for people who wanted to set up as full-time craftspeople. So I did that. I was the only wood turner on the course. There were 9 others who were working in textiles and ceramics and jewellery. And at the end of that year, then I handed in my notice to the school, and I became a wood turner. Actually, that course, Emmett did it the following year along with Glenn Lucas. The 2 of them did it the following year. I think we were the only woodturners to do the course. Unfortunately, it has been discontinued. It was a wonderful opportunity, because in that year I had my own workspace. I had a living allowance. I had sessions on bookkeeping, all the business side of all the business techniques of bookkeeping and marketing and so on. And we had a stand at Showcase, which is the big trade fair in the RDS every spring, or every January it was, wasn't it? And we had a stand there, and so that got me into shops and galleries. People who came to the trade fair looking for product for the coming year. So that's me, Stephen. That's how I got into it.
Thanks, Roger. It sounds like a really wood turning was a really life-changing thing, literally.
Totally, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's it was a big decision. I was leaving my permanent pensionable job, and teaching is a wonderful career as well. But no, I've absolutely no regrets. I've had and still have a wonderful life.
The business course that you were talking about, which I heard McCain speaking about recently, and obviously you said Glenn Lucas did it, sounds like something that the designing should consider reinstating, given some of the very sort of formidable craftspeople and their businesses that grew from it.
Yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity. We should say also that on that course I had a mentor. He was Clive Nunn, the late Clive Nunn, unfortunately, a wonderful furniture maker in Thomastown. So he was my daddy figure for the year, and guided me and advised me and watched over me, and I owe him a lot. I'm going to pay tribute while I'm at it. I'm going to pay tribute to you, Liam, because I remember meeting you during that year, and you were very encouraging, and I've never forgotten that. You're mute, Liam.
I said, the more of us that get into this mess, the better.
If you guys want to mute yourselves there, I'll connect a line into the conversation. You've been waiting patiently. Welcome from Leitrim, Max.
Thanks, Stephen. I guess that makes me the kid of the bunch, doesn't it?
Say that again.
I guess that makes me the kid of the bunch.
That makes you the kid of the bunch, and rather appropriately, because I think you came to wood turning or woodworking in general at a very sort of early formative stage in your life.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I did come to woodworking in general very, very early. I've got pictures of myself at my grandfather's workbench. I think I was about 4 or 5 years old. And being an only child, it's great to discover something that you really love at a young age that you can immerse yourself in. And I just found it fantastic to be able to work with natural materials at that stage where you learn through play, where you learn that if you pick up a broken slate off the ground and grind it off a stone, that's how people used to make arrowheads. You learn to get the hang of the working qualities of materials by playing with them. And that's what I've been doing ever since in various guises. So I guess my background is in furniture design and furniture making. I did the degree in letterfrac 20 years ago. And from there, I've evolved into making hollow wooden surfboards and wooden boats, and into teaching, and more latterly into wood turning. So I've been turning since 2004, I guess. And I count myself very lucky because I've had the road paved for me by the present company, among others. So I think in Ireland here, we're still probably about a decade or two behind America in the evolution. No, evolution is probably the wrong word, but the acceptance of wood turning as a legitimate art form. You know, since the 70s, I think they've accepted wood turning in America as an art form, up with ceramics and glass. I think we're still making ground here, but I'm very thankful for the people that were before me and with me at the moment, you know, that have kicked down those doors.
I suppose as long as we're moving in the right direction,
Yeah,
moving forward, that's the main thing.
I think we very, very much are. And I think in the current circumstances with COVID, where everyone's fatigued with screen time and so on, I think both as makers and as people appreciating work, it's never been more important to work with natural materials and physically touch them, feel the texture, smell the smells, all that. To me, anyway, that's paramount.
I think, yeah, and it's hard to know sometimes when you're so immersed in the area. It sort of feels like a perpetual craft renaissance that's going on. Perhaps some people feel it is happening more broadly, and if that is the case, then it can only be a good thing, and perhaps it might hasten that catching up with, you know, the standing of different types of crafts within the you know, the broader artistic and cultural context. One of the things you mentioned there that's really interesting, which probably harks back to something that Liam was talking about, you know, when he started out, people making functional things only for purpose, for use from designs or you know, the pre-existing examples that were there. But you mentioned the word play, which obviously has a huge you know, role in creativity, and has very much, you know, I suppose until play would have been introduced in people's practice, it would have been very difficult to consider perhaps making artistic work. What I might do, I don't know, Max, maybe if you want to comment again on that idea of play and perhaps experimentation in your work, and I might go back to Liam and ask him when he started playing.
Well, this is the thing. I was thinking about that when Liam was speaking initially. I think it's like through the pioneers, the earlier pioneers like Liam and Roger and Emmett and Glenn and Liam Flynn and so on, it's like we've got permission now to bypass the making functional item stage and make the pieces that our mind can imagine. And I guess in my own circumstance, my wood turning skills had to play a game of catch up with my imagination when I started wood turning, because I had all these ideas, but my skills weren't necessarily there. So I had to immerse myself and climb that steep ladder of a learning curve.
What might be an interesting experiment would be to get you to make a bowl or two, and we could get Liam and Roger to assess them and mark them out of 10 for you. Liam, maybe you could speak a little bit again then about how you know, you transitioned, if you like, from making the functional things to beginning to experiment with form and you know, the material that you were very familiar with and beginning to play, as Max put it.
Yeah, I after serving an apprenticeship, I was given the job of setting up a workshop in Shannon, County Clare, in a place called Ritas, and it was a rehabilitation centre for special needs adults. And I was 11.5 years training people with mild psychiatric problems how to turn. And it might explain a few things about me, having spent 11.5 years there. But I found myself having to design products myself, but I kind of kept harking back to the shapes I saw in Kilkenny. So I had to learn how to design myself. Now, in 1980, I happened to pick up a wood turning magazine and saw that there was a seminar in wood turning advertised over in England in the famous John Makepeace School for Craftsmen in Parnham in Dorset. And I went to the boss and I said, can I go to this? And he said, why would you want to go? You know everything there is to know about wood turning. And I said, oh, okay. And I went off. The next day he called me into the office and he said, listen, I've been thinking about what you said. He said, I think I'll send you. So I went, and my wife and I went to this seminar, and the only thing I can say is that when I arrived and walked in the door, I was in total shock, because can you imagine somebody going from just never having seen anything better than a salad bowl, to suddenly seeing the work of David Ellsworth, Bob Stocksdale, Moulthrop, all these big names, you know, that are worldwide household names. And suddenly seeing all this absolutely astounding to me at the time work. You see, nearly everybody can now make a natural edge bowl. But that time, nobody had ever made a natural edge bowl before. It hadn't been done. But then these Americans who, like David Ellsworth, started off as a potter, and he was making hollow vessels with tiny little holes in the top. And he just decided to start doing the same in timber and using burrs and spalted wood and crotches and different things. And it just blew my mind. And I remember I had to leave halfway through the second day. I was literally overloaded. I couldn't take any more. So we set out for home. And I remember staying in a hotel in Wales that night and having dreams and having all these wooden shapes dancing around in my head. This is absolutely true. So I came home and went back to work, but I started to experiment and gradually started to evolve my own style, making studio work. And to this day, I make salad bowls, but I developed the studio work and gradually got into galleries. I mean, I walked into one of the most conservative art galleries in the country in Limerick, and the owner, I walked in with my pieces and the owner looked at them and he said, "Wow, never saw anything like that before." And he took them in and they sold, and I was getting prices that were equal to more than a week's wages. So that was encouraging, you know. So I kept going and going and going. And eventually I just decided to break with my old job and step out on the thin ice of self-employment. And I've been I would describe it as one order away from bankruptcy ever since, you know. But can I just say that a very interesting thing happened recently. I was contacted by a Swedish guy who is a designer, and I am now back doing exactly what I was doing 50 years ago. He sends me a design and he orders 40 or 50 of each bowl. Has to be made exactly to blueprint. And it's like the whole circle has turned and I'm back doing what I was doing 50 years ago. And what's interesting is I absolutely love it. It's a discipline because it takes you into a place where all your cutting and all your practicing. I used to say to people who wanted to be, you'd meet these young turners who wanted to be art wood turners, and oh, I only make one-off pieces. And I say, well, that's fine, go ahead. But if you could learn how to make lots and lots of the one thing, your art pieces would improve tremendously. So I have absolutely no problem. Somebody said to me recently, you know, is there anything you wouldn't do? And I said, look, if somebody came into my workshop and asked me to make 2,000 sewer covers, I'd make them. And I would enjoy making them because I love doing art pieces. I love doing the sculpture, but I also love doing just getting into a zone and just repeating. The old Japanese potters, a great example of that. They used to train for far, far longer than the likes of us in the West. And they would spend years doing just one simple little tea bowl shape until they got it right. And as you know, the Japanese potters are the best in the world. And there's something there, isn't there? This practice makes perfect. It's absolutely a truism.
I think the idea of repetition is very important in craft in all the different disciplines, and lots of people I've heard talk about it, speak of the importance of it, not as a negative component or a negative contributor to their practice, but a very important part of it, that idea of getting into a consistent groove with what you're doing.
Yeah.
Roger, maybe your work is predominantly, you know, revolving around the bowl form. and you've perfected your own interpretation of that at this stage. Did you start? How different is what you're doing now to what you were doing when you started out? And maybe to avoid going back and forward as well, another question I might just throw out there. Liam mentioned a few of those names that were at the that sort of momentous historic event, by the sounds of it, in Parnham, a number of whom featured a few decades after that, but a few years after you had begun on your journey in the Tracing the Line exhibition in Kilkenny. So maybe once you've spoken about your bowls, you could perhaps reference that exhibition and again, some of those influential figures whose work was being exhibited in Ireland. We're talking, I guess, sort of 25 years after that sort of transformative experience Liam had in the UK.
Yeah, in my own work, when I started off, my first selling was actually in a market, in a weekend market. It was in Dublin, in the Blackrock market, which is a weekend market. I started to sell there, and I was kind of making a bit of everything. Functional bowls, candlesticks, even spinning tops. But a key moment for me was just to say that one of the big, Liam was talking about what wood turning was like when he started. It hadn't evolved that much when I started in the 90s, in the early 90s, and it was quite difficult to see what other people were doing, because you just had the wood turning magazine, and if you were lucky enough to find, there were some books on wood turning, but there was no. My point really is that there was no internet, there was no Instagram, there was no Facebook, there were no YouTube videos. So it was really only when you went when demonstrators came over from abroad, exactly what Liam was talking about in Farnham, that your eyes were opened and you saw things that really surprised you. And I was went to the Irish Woodturners Guild seminar in, I can't remember where it was now, but there was a woodturner from Wales, from Anglesey, called Paul Clare, who was using colour, and he was using colour with sycamore, as it happened. And I was really taken with what he was doing, and I just thought it looked fantastic. I thought, that's something I'd love to try. And just by chance, I got a load of sycamore I come from a farm originally, and from the family farm, sycamore tree was cut down, and I got some sycamore. I found out what wood dyes he was using, and I started colouring. And it really appealed to me. Also, I was being drawn more and more to making quite thin-walled bowls, so really delicate colouring, and that really became, I suppose, my style over the years, what I specialised in. Liam mentioned David Ellsworth being a potter, and I think a lot of my influences would be looking at ceramics. There were actually, I suppose, as it happened at the time, there were a lot more books on ceramics available, because studio ceramics was kind of centuries ahead, I suppose, of studio wood turning at the time. Somebody who had a huge influence on me was the British, well, she was originally Central European, but British ceramicist Lucy Ree. And I was just blown away by her shapes, her colors, her glazes, even her textures, even just down to the details of the feet on her bowls. No, your second question was, sorry. Was about
sorry, just about this exhibition in Kilkenny in
tracing the line,
International Craft Gallery, and Liam had mentioned that a lot of people like David Ellsworth and Richard Raffin, I think, and Ray
Yeah.
Keyes and people like that who had been at Parnham were featured in this exhibition. I guess you had seen that, you know, not at the beginning, but, you know, a good number of years into your career as a woodturner.
Yeah, that was what, about
Like
2005, I think, around then, I think it was. I should have brought the catalogue down. I don't have it here, but it was a lovely exhibition that Liam Flynn curated in the National Craft Gallery in Kilkenny, and it was really, I guess, kind of paying tribute to, showing and paying tribute to woodturners who had a big influence on Irish woodturning, and it included you were in it, Liam, and Kieran was in it, Kieran Forbes, the great woodturner from Downstall Abbey. And then there were people like Ray Key, the late Ray Key, who was a wonderful, wonderful English woodturner. Maria van Kesteren was in it, and it was absolutely one of the greatest thrills of my woodturning life to meet her afterwards. We went for a coffee. Group of people who were at the opening went for a coffee down the road, and I actually have her autograph on my copy of the catalogue. It was a lovely exhibition, quite small, but just for me, some of the gods of woodturning were in it, and just there was quite a range of woodturning, but all superb craftspeople in their own right, and all of them tremendous sense of design, sense of shape, finish. Everything was just right. It was at the time it summed up everything that was good about woodturning. It was really inspiring. I think anybody who saw it would have come away singing.
I think Liam wanted to comment there. Liam, your work was included in that exhibition.
I would say that the current exhibition that's just finishing is in the same kind of standard. Its standard is so high. It at the time, Dressing the Line spoke of the standard, the highest standard of Irish woodturning. And I think that the current exhibition says the same thing. I think it's an absolutely sublime exhibition and a great example of the best of Irish woodturning at this stage in the Irish woodturning scene. And I was saying to Stephen that I think it's a terrible pity if we couldn't all agree to have our pieces kept somewhere so that the whole thing could be travelled as soon as the COVID restrictions are lifted. Because I think that Tracing the Line was an absolutely it was a milestone exhibition. I think this has the potential to be a milestone exhibition too. I don't know if the rest of you agree, but that's what I think.
I'll unmute there for a moment. Liam, while you were talking there, we were getting a little bit of feedback, so I might just ask you to very briefly recap on what you were saying there, and if everybody else could just remember to keep themselves muted when someone else is talking. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was just saying that the exhibition Tracing the Line was it was a milestone exhibition of how woodturning was at that particular moment in the development of Irish woodturning. I would say that the current exhibition that we're just taking part in now, that's just closing, is in the same bracket. It is an exhibition that is it's a sublime example of the best of Irish woodturning at this particular historic moment in Irish woodturning. I think that it's something that we should all consider, whether the work could be kept together and shown, travelled further as soon as the COVID restrictions are lifted. I think that we should approach the Crafts Council, we should approach, you know, other good exhibition spaces, possibly the one in the Phoenix Park. I think that the exhibition speaks volumes about the standard of Irish wood turning at the moment. I don't know if you read my peer review, but that's what I said. It's like, it's just wonderful, wonderful. And I'm not counting my own work here. I'm counting everyone else's work, because I was just absolutely like a kid in a toy store, is how I said it in the peer review, which is going to appear hopefully in the Wood Turning magazine. But yeah, I think if it's at all possible, I suggest that we try and keep it together.
Thanks, Liam. I think it's probably worth pointing out, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying in terms of, you know, the current state of health, the rude health of the Irish, you know, kind of wood turning scene, and it's probably exemplified by some of the omissions from the current exhibition. You know, some people whose work I would have loved to have included alongside all of yours and the others participants, but you know, sort of space wouldn't really allow it. But I agree with you to a certain extent. Unfortunately, the recent times we've been through, it was like pushing a boulder up a hill a lot of the time, just trying to get the doors open in Clonmel. So to do it elsewhere doesn't look like it's going to be much easier at the moment, but we'll see. We live in hope. I think, you know, given where everyone is and the fact that everyone is, you know, regularly working and turning out work, no pun intended, then, you know, I'm sure if we found another venue, then it you know, would be relatively easy to make it happen again. It would be great to see. Maybe it's a good opportunity to bring you back in, Max. You would be kind of, you know, very much at the forefront of contemporary Irish wood turning. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience domestically, I suppose, but also internationally. And I don't know, would you identify as an Irish wood turner, or do you think it's important to identify in that sense, or?
If I could answer that, first of all, with two words, yes and yes. I think I absolutely do identify as an Irish wood turner, although I was born in Germany. And I think it's massively important. Like if we go to America or if we go to the UK, I think it's really important that we fly the flag for Irish craft and Irish wood turning and Irish sculpture when we go abroad, so that we're not forgotten and people see what fantastic work has been produced in this country. So yeah, I do. And I mean, what Liam described about going to see John Makepeace in Parnham back then, I had that epiphany moment going to my first AAW symposium about, I don't know, was it 6 years ago or so? It was just, I actually don't think I slept for 4 nights or 3 nights. It was just my kind of introduction to what's happening on the scene in America. And it really is no different to the Irish one, except bigger and been there a bit longer. I know the Irish Woodturners Guild has been there a very long time. I think, Liam, is it longer than the AAW even? Irish Woodturners Guild? Yeah. But just in America, because it's such a big country, the whole thing has just snowballed, and the instant galleries there in the symposia, they're just vast. And the people you meet and the openness of the Americans, I think it's great. The more we can bring of this to America, the better. Even what Liam said, you know, about traveling the exhibition, why don't we travel to America? You know?
I'd encourage everyone to open their little black book in that case and get emailing and texting and telephoning, you know, people wherever they are. I guess, yeah, Liam, you've been to the States to teach and demonstrate, and I know Emmett Kane has as well. Can you speak a little bit about, if you have time? I know you needed to be knocking off around 8.
I've just been given a reprieve for a few extra minutes.
Okay, because I think, as Max said, that that American context for wood turning as a craft is very important. And maybe you could speak a little bit about your experiences in the US and how that's kind of informed what you do and you know, your confidence in your approach and stuff like that.
The first thing I'd say is that I would absolutely agree with Max in the sense that the wood turners in Ireland are just as good as the American wood turners. The standard of that exhibition would stand up anywhere in America. In fact, I think that the Americans are going, this is just my opinion, but I think they're going a little bit too far. You know, you're beginning to see work now that you don't even recognize as wood turning anymore. You know, what I liked about the exhibition that's just been is that you knew you were in a wood turning, you were in wood, you know, it was, the material was wood was celebrated. It wasn't like, you have to, you know, you have to follow your heart when it comes to how you use wood. And Maria van Kesteren is the great example of somebody who treated wood as just a material. She either blackened it or bleached it so that the grain would never take from the shape. And I absolutely see the point of that. In fact, I do some work myself, which is black. Not very much, but I do. I have absolutely the best of admiration. In fact, my favorite piece in that exhibition is a blackened piece. I'm not going to say whose it was, so nobody gets a swelled head, but it wasn't one of mine. There was a spectacular piece in there in that exhibition, and it was black. But I think that we should consider approaching Irish Americans. We have a Paddy in the White House now, and there was a wonderful organization in America once called the it was called the Irish American Cultural Institute, and it used to have a place in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I had an exhibition there once. And so there may be openings in Irish American, like for instance, the John F. Kennedy Center in Washington, DC would be a good one to approach. And yeah, I think I could send an email. Okay. But I think that the Americans won't be necessarily interested in an exhibition of Irish wood turning per se, unless it goes to somewhere like SOFA in Chicago or somewhere like that. That might be a place to try as well, and have kind of, you would be part of a much bigger event, which would have a booth or a subsection or whatever you want to call it. That might be worth pursuing. But you need to get some kind of a sugar daddy to pay for it. You're going to have to get a sponsor.
Well, it's probably worth mentioning, actually, the Design and Crafts Council and Tipperary County Council Arts Office both very kindly supported the current exhibition. But I don't know if either of them were prepared to fund the sending of it to Chicago. But we'll see. We can definitely talk.
Okay, Kerry Gold or somebody like that. Yeah, you could approach Kerry Foods, because Kerry Gold has just been launched in the general supermarkets in America. I have a son over there, and he tells me that any supermarket you go into in America now, the go-to butter is Kerry Gold. So they're doing well over there. So they might be worth approaching. And one of their executives commissioned a piece for me there last year, and I'll approach him and ask him. So we'll just start making little phone calls here and there and make some, you know, start putting out the feelers.
Sounds great. I'll have to start putting aside some time from my annual leave by the sounds of it. Roger, maybe you could speak a little bit about your American experience. I know you've some experience of dealing with American collectors, and you exhibited at that fair Liam was mentioning in Chicago, SOFA. Roger, you'll need to unmute yourself there.
The Design and Crafts Council took a booth at SOFA in Chicago for, I think it was 3 years. Forget what the dates were. It was around 2010, that kind of time, for three consecutive years. and they brought over the work of about 20 Irish craftspeople, and I was fortunate to be included in that. And it was absolutely mesmerizing, as both Liam and Max have said. It's the size of it. You go into this huge hall. This was in Chicago, Navy Pier in Chicago, a huge exhibition hall, and there must have been, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 big galleries from all around the world, and it take for the first day you're blinded by it all, and then gradually you see the work that you like. Anyway, it worked very well for us, and a lot of the Irish exhibitors were taken up by American galleries, and I was lucky to be taken up by Delmano Gallery, which at the time was the foremost wood turning gallery, I guess, certainly in America, probably in the world. And so for the next 2 years, I was shown both by the Design and Crafts Council, the National Craft Gallery, and by Delmano. So each time I went over, I spent quite a bit of time on the Delmano booth, and I met some of my American wood turning heroes who were also on the booth: William Hunter, Steve Sinner, people like that. And my relationship.
We seem to have lost Roger a little bit there. His connection has dropped off. Hopefully he'll...
Delmano continued. I mean, I was in various exhibitions then through the years in their gallery, one of which was a Small Treasures exhibition where the work had to be no more than 6 inches in any direction, and various other exhibitions. Unfortunately, Delmano no longer exists. Both the directors have passed away, and it actually went bust a few years before Ray. It closed a few years before Ray Lear passed away, the surviving director. And I was also in the States. I was also invited to a show in Boston, Craft Boston, which would be the equivalent of the old, say, the Chelsea Craft Fair. That it's that kind of show where a number of individual exhibitors show their work, and they invited a few international exhibitors every year as well. And I did that, I think, 4 times. It's really interesting, and you're meeting American collectors, and just the size of the place. American collectors, some really wonderful people, very well organized. They compare, they compare notes. They organize exhibitions, and really supportive. And it was a bit of quite an eye opener to see how the relationship between a collector, between collectors and makers, how that works. And besides, there are 2 or 3 collectors that I owe a lot to. In particular, I might mention the Waterburys, Ruth and David Waterbury. I think Liam would know them as well. Were really interesting and interested, very interested in wood turning, and knew an awful lot, and were incredibly friendly and supportive, and had built up a superb collection. And when they were downsizing, and I think they moved house, they put on a huge exhibition of their work, of their collection in Minneapolis, in the art museum there, and produced a stunning coffee table book of the entire collection. And then the other thing that's important about American collectors is that very often they will, or occasionally certainly, they will donate pieces to museums, which is very important, because it's raising the profile of wood turning, to have wood turning collections in museums, and for the individual maker, it's an enormous boost it's fantastic to have that on your CV, that you're in a museum where a prestigious museum in the States and even elsewhere.
Thanks, Roger. Max, I might bring you back in again. I know you're very busy at the moment working on your current body of work, the Edge vessels, and you've spent a lot of time yourself in the States and sold to collections there, and you're currently working with Sarah Myerscough Gallery in London. I wonder how much time you spend at the lathe thinking about what a gallerist might want or what a collector might want, or does it come into your head or your mind when you're doing that?
I really try not to. I think the work suffers if you do that. If you, as I lately have, if you come into contact with a very, very good gallerist with an intrinsic understanding of the work and not just trying to make what, or push the artists to make what they think people will buy, but they really understand the work and understand the material themselves, then a partnership is actually helpful and a positive thing. But generally, I try to let my ideas come naturally to me and to evolve before I ever go to the lathe. So I'm not one of those people that designs on the fly on the lathe. Very rarely will I make corrections to a piece on the lathe as I go. Usually all the kind of intellectual property work is done in a sketchbook and in my mind beforehand. And when I get to the lathe, it's just, I don't want to say, no, just is even the wrong word. It's a hugely enjoyable and important process for me. Like I said, the material, but it's the manufacturing stage. It's the making it real. All the blueprint has already been done. So I guess I'm saying that now. The Edge vessels are probably the least like that of all my work. I contradict myself a lot in case you hadn't noticed. My early work, the tube vessels, the multi-axis tube vessels, they were all meticulously planned. The further I go now, the more free I guess I'm getting. And in terms of the carving, some of that is decided on the lathe, but the form is definitely decided beforehand. I'm not sure does that answer your question. I think I went off on a sidetrack there a little bit.
I can't actually remember the question I asked, to be honest. But it's interesting listening to talk about some things being planned in advance and other things taking perhaps a bit more of a natural course in the making process. I was speaking with Roger separately recently, and we were discussing technology is a great help to us. It's what enabled us all to be able to gather around this evening and for other people to be watching on YouTube. Roger was talking earlier about how when he started out wood turning, it was, apart from a couple of magazines, it would have been very difficult to get books and things like that. And I can only imagine the access to information was even less or more difficult rather when Liam started out. In your experience, Max, where we're constantly being bombarded with imagery, I suppose what myself and Roger were discussing was that evolution of your own work, your own style, your own kind of groove. How do you filter what you see in the modern day?
I think, yeah, I was kind of thinking this as soon as you started to speak about technology. I think Instagram in particular is very much a double-edged sword. It's great for us to get our work out there, but we have to be careful how much we take in of other people's work. So on any given evening, I could be looking at cabins in the woods, ceramics, motorcycles, and wooden boats on Instagram, and all that stuff trickles into my mind. And my mind, the subconscious, like anyone's, molds those things and remolds them, and maybe 5 years later spits something out. And what it spits out could be something entirely innovative and new, or it could be something that's a rework of something that has gone before. and that's always happened. I mean, none of us are innovative in that way. I've got ceramic vessels sitting here on the radiator made by a local potter. They're very nice, clean shape. But I'm sure there's a Roman potter turning his grave from 2,000 years ago, and hey, you copied me, you know. So to a degree, we're all copying each other. We just have to be careful that we keep that in bounds and we try to limit it. And yeah, I mean, I've been on both sides of that conundrum, and it can be hurtful, because when you're an artist and you're a maker, your work is very personal. It's not like I'm not picking on accountants now, in case there's any out there, but it's not like you're, let's say, a painter decorator who gets paid to paint a wall white, and there's not much of themselves that goes into that. It's, you know, it's a task that has to be done and so on. But when it's something that comes from your mind and more so from your heart, it really is a big part of you that goes into that. And we're all very protective and touchy about that. It's a deep and wide subject, I think. And I guess that part of the reason I keep switching styles is because I've got a restless mind, but another part is because I don't want to ever commit and concrete myself down to one style where people can say, well, that's an evolution of this, or on the other side, where other people can take that and evolve it further. You know, I think it'd be too... No, I'm not actually sure where I'm going with that.
I might pick up on the point you made, you know, that it's very difficult for anyone to be original. And I think if everyone, in whatever creative discipline they work, can acknowledge or accept that they're very unlikely to ever be original, it's probably a safe place to start. And maybe, you know, from there, you know, from that kind of self-awareness and knowledge, you can move forward. But at the same time, I'll contradict myself and say that there are some true originals, and Liam was mentioning one of the big shadows that was cast over, or that he felt was cast over the current exhibition, which was Maria van Kesteren, and perhaps one of the other shadows that looms large in a good way, but whose work was featured in the exhibition, was Liam Flynn's, who I know you'll all, you know, have the highest esteem for, I would imagine, and I've had varying degrees of interaction and experiences with Liam. Roger, I might ask you, I know you knew Liam well and had a good personal relationship as well as a professional relationship with him. For the people listening out there, you might touch a little bit on Liam's influence and importance for wood turning in an Irish context, and you know, the influence he had internationally as well.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Liam Flynn was an absolutely outstanding world-class wood turner who died tragically young and totally unexpectedly in 2017. And I think the craft world, not just in Ireland, but internationally, and not just in wood turning, is still in mourning for him. Not just because he was a wonderful wood turner, but he was beloved. He was a really lovely man. And Liam was world class. For example, there's work of his, there's a piece of his in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and in various other museums around the world, including some gorgeous pieces in our National Museum in Collins Barracks. He had a very high standing internationally, particularly, I suppose, in the States, Australia, in Europe, in Britain. He was on, I can show you actually, I just brought this down. In 2011, which was the year of craft, the An Post brought out with the Craft and Design Council brought out a series of postage stamps for the different. Sorry, can you see that? For the different disciplines. So you have ceramics and metal and textiles, and the one that I'm tapping with my finger is Liam's, one of Liam's pieces. So he represented wood. He was chosen to represent wood, which was a tremendous honor. He had, fortunately, he was recognised in his lifetime, and he had him in 2011 again. He had a fantastic solo exhibition in which was curated by Eleanor Flegg in the Hunt Museum in Limerick, which was, I mean, he seemed to be far too young to have a retrospective exhibition. I suppose you would have called it a mid-career exhibition, and it was absolutely fantastic. And one of the interesting things about it was that Liam, even though each piece was unique, each piece was different, they were very clearly all from the same family. A piece that he made at 18 or 19 was a Liam Flynn piece, and the piece that he had just made was a Liam Flynn piece. You could just see that the same person had made them, which is quite extraordinary. And what my relationship with Liam, apart from knowing him over the years and really loving his company, I was asked to write the exhibition, the catalogue essay for that exhibition, and I had the most memorable afternoon on a freezing February day, sitting in his freezing workshop in Abbeyfield in Limerick with my iPod. Do you remember those? My iPod running and recording hours of conversation, which I still have and still treasure. And it was just an absolutely fascinating day. It was such a, looking back on it, it was such a privilege. And the kind of work he made, he specialized in vessels. It was almost all designed, not functional, wasn't designed to be functional. So they were vessels, bowls and vessels, using native woods, particularly oak, but also beech, sycamore, holly. And he turned the wood wet. He turned it unseasoned, so that as it dried, it distorted. But one of Liam's great abilities was he was able to read the wood brilliantly. Cutting the wood from the log, he knew in advance how it would behave, how it would move as it dried. It wasn't by chance. So what started as round became oval, became unround, and they were. He made a lot of hollow forms. We talked earlier about people who know wood turning, about David Ellsworth and his impossibly small openings through which he hollowed the interior of his almost spherical pieces. Liam's openings were wider than that, but he made just beautiful shapes. He just had an incredible ability to understand shape, to understand line, to understand form. His surface treatments ranged from unadorned to very beautifully carved patterns to flutes. And one of the things that he was famous for was his inner rim. I could just show you a photograph. I'll show you this book in a moment. I want to talk about it. One of his inner rim. So if you can see that, so it's like it looks almost like an optical illusion, as if there were a bowl inside a bowl. So there's one rim inside another, and he played around with that a lot. He played around with the rims. He played around with the sides of his bowls. He with the feet. And he was constantly experimenting. He made shapes which are like barrel forms. Some of his more recent work were very tall, pale woods with a blackened, for example, with a black band around the rim. He played with feet. He put sometimes with 3 feet under them, bit like a cauldron. if I could just read, if you bear with me, can I just read a tiny bit, something I wrote, it was in the Hunt Museum exhibition, just trying to capture, because I think there was something very spiritual about his work. And just, this is something I wrote at the beginning of my essay, trying to sum up what for me was the essence of a Liam Flynn piece. And I said, we long to touch and caress them, to cup our hands around them and lift them and feel for ourselves their astonishing lack of weight. The shapes are subtle, round but not circular, delicately undulating, alive, changing as we move. We are intrigued by the detailing, rhythmic carvings, double rims, shaped feet. His enclosed forms are containers of darkness. They are sculptural pieces, sacred vessels, objects of meditation, timeless artifacts. They exude a sense of calm assurance, yet they are also dynamic, restrained yet powerful with latent energy, erotic. And at the opening of that exhibition, actually, Eleanor Flegg's mother who had never seen his work before, came to the opening, and she was so moved that she went away and thought about it and actually wrote a sermon in wood, which she delivered in the Unitarian Church in Dublin. A whole sermon with the starting point, a really poetic, beautiful description of his work. I just want to show this beautiful book. Came out last year. So you're seeing it in mirror writing. Fluid Forms, Liam Flynn, Fluid Forms. And it's a beautiful book, which his great friend and collaborator, they worked on pieces together, Kevin O'Dwyer, silversmith Kevin O'Dwyer, and Liam's partner, Mary Leahy, masterminded the production of this absolutely fabulous book, which is it's a mixture of essays and stunning photographs of Liam's work. And they're essays by people like Jennifer Goff from the National Museum of Ireland, Sarah Marskoff, the gallerist, Kieran Forbes, who his great friend Kieran Forbes wrote a beautiful memoir of Liam, Eleanor Flegg herself, Oliver Sears, the gallerist in Dublin, and Liam's aunt, Una Nick Henry, and various other people. And I have an essay in that as well. It was just a marvelous privilege to have been involved in that. For anybody who's interested, if you go on, look at liamflynnwoodturner.com, liamflynnwoodturner.com. You'll see images of his work there, and also if you're interested in getting the book, all the details are there. It can be ordered from various places, including directly from Liam's beloved Mary Leahy.
Thanks, Roger. The book actually was for sale in Clonmel Art Exhibition as well, and it's right for anyone who wants to get a copy of it directly. If you go to Liam Flynn's website, there's details on how to order it there. Roger, I might have you to mute yourself there again. Thank you. Liam was undoubtedly a huge figure, and he had cited you, Liam O'Neill, as an influence on him. I wonder, as his practice evolved, did that influence turn back on itself? Did it kind of, come back to influence you a bit?
I never thought about that. I think I always treated Liam's work as different from mine, and something that it'd be a bit like Max's work. I wouldn't do that. It's something I don't do myself, but I really admire those, that style. But there were several people in the exhibition that I had that feeling about. I just would say that I wouldn't say necessarily influenced me. Maybe he did, I don't know. I just don't think that I'm aware of that. I think that I second everything that was said about him. He was a superb turner, a superb human being, wonderful man, lovable in the extreme. But I admired his work, and I've seen his work in collections like people like the famous collector that Roger knows, I'm sure as well, Fleur Bressler over in Washington, D.C. And Fleur has a fair selection of his work as well. So the best collections in the world that I am aware of, and it was something to walk into Fleur's gallery. She has a private gallery, and you walk into her gallery and you see Liam's work, and it gives you a kind of a sense of pride, you know, that the Irish wood turning scene could produce somebody that good. Or you look at, like, I mean, I include Roger's work in that as well. You know, that that sort of, you know, we're back to this idea of the repetition. We're back to the idea of the old Japanese craftsmen who, like, there's only subtle differences between some of Liam's pieces, but then there is difference in every, there's no two exactly alike, but there's a repetitiveness, and you can see that that led to it led through the evolution of his forms, that he repeated and repeated and repeated and refined and refined and refined. And I think that I see the same in Roger's work. I see it in other people's work as well. But I think we're back to this idea that that's not to downgrade anyone else. It's just to say that that is something that I 100% see contributes greatly to the evolution of a craftsman. Patience, you know.
Max,
by the way, I have to go. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave the meeting at this stage.
Thanks, Liam.
It was great being part of it, and it's great being part of the exhibition, and I hope to goodness that it travels the world. So thanks, Stephen, for doing a great job.
No problem. Thanks, Liam. I appreciate that, and thanks for taking part tonight and in the exhibition. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Okay. I might hold on to the other two guys for a couple of minutes more. I'm conscious we have passed our hour and people are, you know, perhaps starving in the background. Max, just on that point you mentioned about when I asked you the importance of identifying as an Irish wood turner, and how relevant has it been to you in your practice? I say somewhat in jest, how much of a help or a hindrance has it been to you for to have had people like Liam Flynn and Roger and Emmett and many more besides, you know, to have kind of paved the way to some degree?
Right. Yeah, look, I think I touched on that earlier, but I don't think it's got a huge amount to do with nationality really, but just that we're in this physical space, and especially as Roger mentioned earlier, in pre-Google and pre-Instagram times, that there have been people here that have kicked down the doors and made it possible for us to do what we do now, I think is vitally important. But whether that be in Czechoslovakia or Russia or Ireland, I don't think it matters at all. I don't think it matters at all, really. And I guess I was listening to Liam there, if I can come back on that as well. It shows the difference in perspectives and the way we look at things. I mean, I see that as well in Liam's work. It evolved over a long period of time. And I think, I don't know who it was, referred to Liam as a virtuoso vessel maker. And I think that's absolutely hitting the nail on the head. But I know people, I'm one of them, who can't do repetition very well. Just our minds race ahead, and I mean, incremental evolution is not something I do. I do evolution in kangaroo jumps in different directions, producing different bodies of work. And I know other turners, especially in America, who work like that as well. And it's somewhat of a difficult place to be, because you can confuse collectors and so on. But it's often reassuring when you hear that there's a common thread throughout your work. Like I heard Roger speak about Liam's work there in the gallery, that you could see the evolution from 18 or 17 or 18 to the current place. I think I was just thinking about that, listening to other people talking and thinking about it and reflecting on it myself, and seeing from different perspectives and in different craftspeople how that's relevant. So some people evolve incrementally, others evolve, I don't know how to express it, in stop-start fashion. I don't know.
I'm not sure I'm qualified or sufficiently qualified from an art historical perspective to comment, but it's vastly interesting to see those kangaroo jumps from one style to another. It's very interesting and very engaging. Again, I'd probably restate what Roger said, that there does seem to be a continuity of sorts. Perhaps in the imaginative leap itself, to the different types of work you're doing at the moment. So
one person I can relate to in America is Michael Hoslock, or in Canada, should I say. If you were to look at Michael Hoslock's work, the one word the words you would use to describe it is innovative and investigative and ever-changing, I guess. And in each discipline or each area he's experimented in, he's excelled, and that's really motivated me and influenced me. Like, you look at his black pieces with the little acrylic or epoxy dots on them, they're distinctively Hoslock. Then you see his bird vessels, and you see his pencil and milk paint vessels, but there's a line, a common thread that travels through them all, and I think that's quite fascinating. Just shows the different ways of looking at things, I guess, doesn't it?
For sure. Roger, I wonder, you're nodding along in recognition of a lot of what Max is saying there. Have you got a box of things you experimented with in terms of forms or things like that, that diverged from what you're predominantly known for?
Yes and no. I have a little shelf upstairs where I have some very early pieces, and I'm always quite interested and amused when I go back and look at them and see probably how bad they are, but also it's interesting for me, I suppose, just I don't show them to anybody, just to see the evolution and how they led to this, to this, to this. I suppose in my case, what I'm not like Max. I'm in awe of what Max, each thing that Max does, whether it's his multi-axis turning or his amazing vessels that he's been doing in the last couple of years. I diverged from my bows to an extent in that I
seem to have lost Roger briefly there, but he'll probably come back shortly. Well, while he's
doing make jewelry, techniques, coloring. Selling point of view, I think it was important for me to do that. I realized it was important for me to do that because the market for selling solely decorative bowls and vessels is quite a restricted market. Whereas jewelry is functional. They're decorative, but also the kind of cross. I think you might agree. They cross the line between functional and decorative. And And that I've really enjoyed that, because it's a completely different challenge, different shapes, different, to some extent, different techniques. And again, the Crafts Council helped me a lot with that. I got funding to work with a fabulous jeweler, Erica Marks, who Max knows because she's also living in Leitrim, and she pointed me in the right direction with a lot of just the details of things like, how do you hang a chain on a piece of wood in a nice way, you make, silver bales and so on. And then one thing led to another, and my pendants, I thought, well, actually, if I blow them up, I can make wall pieces using the same idea. So like a giant pendant becomes a wall piece. And actually, something that often happens, I mean, you've got different sources of inspiration. And one thing that I have found over the years is you get inspired simply from listening to people. I've done a lot of craft fairs over the years, which are brilliant. They're incredibly hard work, but they're brilliant because you're in direct contact with your customers and you're getting direct feedback all the time. And so the idea of making jewelry came when somebody said, look, I've nowhere to put this little bowl. I love it, but I've nowhere to put it. I've no surface. And I've got cats and grandchildren. But if I'd have to be able to wear it. So I said, okay. At first I resisted. I thought, well, I can make jewelry. But then I thought, actually, yeah, there's something in this. And the same then with the wall pieces. People saying, no, I've no flat surfaces left, but I have walls. Okay. And you also from commissions. I'm sure, I don't know if Max has had this experience or not, but you get a commission from somebody, and you think it's a crazy commission. And you make it, and then you realize actually it wasn't so crazy at all. I'll just very briefly give you one little story, which is where I was invited. I was asked by a textile designer to make. He wanted a grey bowl inlaid with silver, and the grey had to be the color of the Murray grey cow. Now, I'm a farmer's son, but I'd never heard of Murray grey cows, so I googled Murray grey cow and found it, and made the bowl. But I thought it was a crazy commission, because I thought silver and grey, that won't work. The silver will disappear. The silver needs a dark surface so that it will shine against it. And in fact, it worked brilliantly, because the silver, as you looked into the bowl, the silver appeared and disappeared, and as you rotated the bowl, the silver disappeared and reappeared, and it was lovely, and I've made quite a few of them since then. So I think it's just to finish up on that. I think it's important to keep an open mind when people give you a piece of feedback or make a suggestion which you think is bonkers. I don't know if you've had that experience, Max.
Do you know? I haven't, because I don't get very many commissions. I get galleries approaching me asking me to make new pieces, but I don't get very many commissions at all. But I was just thinking, in the former life when I was a furniture maker, I used to always strive to make my own designs. And I don't want to say hate, but it used to get my back up to have to make someone else's design. I really didn't like it very much at all. So no, that points out again the differences in how we approach our work and how different people are wired in viewing how and why we make and so on.
Max Brosi, not available for commissions. I'm sure someone will come along someday with an offer that's far too tempting, and you'll have to do it. I'm conscious that people, perhaps have some other things to do and have been staying with us for a little bit longer than we perhaps originally intended. To sort of begin to conclude, really, something you mentioned recently, Max, I think I saw on social media, and something Roger and I were discussing recently. More broadly speaking, in terms of recent events and craft generally, has your, and this is to both of you, has your craft been a refuge in recent times? Has it been a great sort of, I don't want to say safety net, but, somewhere to go?
Well, okay.
Yeah, you go ahead, Max. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for me, absolutely, it has. It very, very much has. Even before COVID, it has. It's been my main outlet for creative energy, for idea exploration, and on and on and on, even before COVID. But now, where we can't go very far from our homes, and as lucky as I am to live in the countryside and to be able to walk around outside, my workshop is absolutely my refuge, because it's a space where I'm not under pressure, and I can create, I can make, and I can get away from these damn pixels on screens, and I can pick up a fresh, wet chunk of timber, and I can smell it, I can touch it, I can feel the spray of the sap hitting me in the face when I'm turning. That's the stuff that's real. So yeah, in every way, yes, it's so important. And I think if I can just elaborate on that a little bit, people sometimes say, oh, craft is dead, and those are old skills, they're not relevant in the modern world. The more digital the world gets, the more relevant those skills get. I mean, just look at the Canadian and American tool makers, Veritas and Lee Nielsen, that make high-end cabinet making tools. They've never been as busy selling as many tools as now. It's the executives in cities that live on a laptop all day that strive to have some connected time in the evenings. And I mean connected to material and to nature and to creativity and to hand and heart skills. It's vital. I don't want to hog all the airtime here. See how Roger feels about it.
Yeah, I would concur with everything you say there, Max. And certainly the various lockdowns it made me realize how fortunate I am and how fortunate I guess we are as makers. My life hasn't changed that much, really. I work from home anyway, and so does my wife. And we've got enough space, and life continues. And I think just to broaden it out slightly, for craftspeople, I think it's been, I guess for a lot of people, it's been pretty tough. It's been very tough, with galleries closed and so on, and shops closed, and on the other hand, just trying to look on the bright side of things, we're very lucky this didn't happen 30 years ago before the internet, that people can continue to sell on the internet, either as individual makers or as shops and galleries. I don't know what we'd have done 30 years ago. And using Zoom, I mean, Zoom has and other forms of social media have connected us. I've been at more demonstrations since COVID came than I have been for years. I was at the American Association of Woodturners annual symposium for $20 or something, and I had a whole weekend of fabulous turning, and it was interesting. I mean, it included somebody like Glenn Lucas turning from his workshop in Carlow. Pat Carroll in Wexford run every fortnight. He hosts Meet the Woodturner event, which has been absolutely fantastic. I've met Max, has been one of the woodturners whom I've met and woodturners from all over the world. He's had Richard Raffin from Australia. He's had Steve Sinner from the States, the great David Ellsworth from the States. Woodturners from the UK. He had Emmett Kane on last Sunday. Also demonstrations, and it works. The people, teachers who can no longer teach in their workshops are giving the most fantastic demonstrations. They're really good camera angles, everything's set up. Pat Carroll again, Glenn Lucas, amazing. And various other woodturners all around the world. So you can sit in on a demonstration, and with all the different angles, you see it actually in some ways much better than if you're actually in the workshop itself. Just on the question of that classes and so on, when we get back to normal, and then if there's anybody out there who has never woodturned and would be interested in woodturning, it's not like when I was starting. I just went to evening classes in a local school, and that was it. There was very little available. Now there are some. I guess woodturning is different from something like ceramics or glass, which are taught in art colleges. Woodturning is not taught in art colleges. And even when you were in Letterfrac, Max, I don't think it was on the curriculum, even though there was a lathe, but that was about it, I think. Whereas now, various woodturners around the country, and I'm just to mention a few names for people who might be interested. If you're watching from Tipperary, you've got Donal Ryan in Barcelona, who's very well set up and very, very good teacher. Glenn Lucas, who has just built a state-of-the-art workshop, studio, school in County Carlow, Fina in County Carlow. In Wexford, you have Pat Carroll, whom I mentioned, and Robert O'Connor, Emmett Kane from the exhibition, Joe Laird in Dublin. You have Seamus Cassidy in County Meath. You have Ambrose and Breed O'Halloran in Galway. And I could go on. There are umpteen people that I've left off that list, but just go on the internet, look them up. And the other thing, if you're interested in getting into woodturning, the Irish Woodturners Guild, we've mentioned them several times this evening. They're a most extraordinary organisation with chapters all around the country. I don't know, there's 700 or 800 members. People who are passionate about woodturning. Some superb woodturners, people who are doing it as a hobby. Absolutely superb and really pushing out the boundaries. And if you're interested in woodturning and getting involved, go to one of their meetings, join up. You will get a great welcome, and you will get every kind of advice and encouragement, and away you go.
Thanks, Roger.
It's a wonderful. I have found the crafts world to be a wonderful world to be in. Craftspeople are very, very giving, very generous, very friendly, mutually supportive. It's a generally non-bitchy, not bitchy. It's a really, I think you've probably found the same, Max, but it's a lovely world to be in.
Perhaps based on what you're both saying there, Max, with the demand there seems to be out there for the tool makers, and Roger, with all the courses and demonstrations that people might have been able to avail of over the last 8 months, maybe we can look forward to a post-pandemic craft boom, which might be a nice note to end on. I think our allotted time on Zoom will cut us off in a couple of minutes if we don't do it ourselves. So I might just thank you both for joining in tonight, and to Liam, who was with us earlier. Thanks to all of the other makers who contributed to the show and everyone who's involved with it. It was a great refuge to me at times last year, just the putting together of it. The experience wasn't quite as tangible as the making of the works would be, but it was a special experience for me. And I look forward to seeing you all in real time and real life at some stage, soon.
Stephen, thank you for doing it.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, and thank you to Emer and Helena in the Arts Centre, and South Tipperary County Council, and to the Crafts Council, it's Art Design and Crafts Council, and particularly to you, Stephen. You've done a superb job in the most difficult of circumstances.
And thanks, Roger. As I've said before, it's my view is that when the work is so good and so enjoyable to see and handle, that the experience of doing an exhibition like this really is a pleasure when the work is so good and it's all, water off a duck's back. I would especially like to thank Emer, who does get set up this evening, Lena, the director at South Tipperary Arts Centre as well, and to the people who so patiently waited at the beginning while we drove ourselves trying to get the tech sorted this evening. So thanks everyone, and I hope it was enjoyable and somewhat informative, and we'll talk again, I'm sure.